drugs, etc., being promoted by top people like Timothy O'Leary, which is a Masonic term. We should break it down. He's a light bringer. O'Leary is a light bringer. He lights the old gas lamps in the streets. That's what O'Leary is. And it was a time of the O'Leary. They were to light the lamps and make a new illumined society, but not too bright. Not too bright. That's why it's still gas. And the people started using that terminology too. It's a gas. It was all a big joke by those at the top that gave us the complete culture. And O'Leary and other top doctors and scientists were put out there on stage, on mainstream televisions, to promote what was to become the religion of the world. A religion that would be tied in with Mother Earth, and a religion that would be tied in with greening of the planet. Now green is everywhere. You hear it everywhere. It's all through big business, because, like all culture, it's promoted from the top down. No culture is allowed to exist coming from the bottom by itself, because it could disrupt any plans that governments have laid out. And believe you me, governments don't sit and haggle in congresses or parliaments about trivial things. The real government is busy planning a long-term future. And therefore, all major cultural movements which have to interweave together, interlock together through all facets of society, have to be authorized and worked out and managed from the top. And that's precisely what was happening. It came out later that O'Leary and others were actually CIA paid by the CIA to promote hallucinogenic drugs. Quite amazing. And I lived through that because I was a bit too young. But I grew up watching people getting, losing their minds and so on, and talking to the sky and people that didn't exist. And at the same time, I watched the Beatles, that I couldn't really understand at first. I was too young. But I watched this tremendous promotion through music, and I had got Plato. I went to my library when I was, the adult library that is, when I was 5. And I looked at Plato and different ones, and he talked about culture. And here I was witnessing a change in culture, meaning it was promoted from the top. And the Beatles started off as the clean-cut young men. That was to grab the audience and to put the older generation at ease. Very clever. They had to put the older generation at ease, the parents of the youngsters that were really the target. And once they had the big following and got all the hits, then they could change their appearance. And then, once they grew their hair long and so on, which is okay, it's a rebellion against the short haircuts of the military, so I don't mind it at all. However, then they went off to India and had a few hits there. And suddenly we hear about the Maharishi Yogi. And that was all over the magazines. And suddenly the people who were older than me were parroting all these terms that came from India, terms that they were eating up and discussing and debating. And you see, all these particular terms are religious terms, and the people who were parroting them didn't know that they were learning a religion. And it must be good if their superstars were promoting it, because everyone wants to follow the stars. That's what a wandering star is. You follow the stars. They give you the stars from the top. And as I say, I watched all this happening. And I remember reading in the papers how professors at university had seen limousines, big limos, with men, well-dressed men, throwing garbage bags full of LSD pills over the walls in universities and major colleges. That's how they got it introduced. It wasn't by the little dealer in a laboratory just cooking some stuff up. It was made by the big drug companies. Much later on, I found they've been experimenting with it since the 1930s. And in Peter Wright's book, much later on too, I found out that even Lord Victor Rothschild, who was the head of all British security during the Cold War at one point, even though Wright was pointing to him as being the main suspect for passing information on to Moscow, Rothschild was using this stuff and testing it out on MI5 and MI6 agents. Quite something. And that was in the 50s. They were doing that. But then, in the 60s and 70s, they made sure that the real target got their doses. And it wasn't just a drug culture and a music culture that was getting heavily promoted from the top. It was a separation of the generations that was being heavily promoted, and very few people living through it, the older and the younger, even realized it. That was its primary intent. And also, the secondary intent was to create a new religion, a religion that only now, many, many, many years later, we've come to understand was to do with the new agenda for the new world order, as they called it. They've used this term many times, long before Bush, even Adolf Hitler used it. It was used in the 1800s by people in the Cecil Rhodes Society, a new world order. And the greening stuff now all makes sense, now that have a whole generation grown up to parrot religious terms they don't even understand, that come mainly from Hinduism, with a touch of Shinto and a touch of everything else, like peppered in a pot, just a little touch and a dab here and there. And it's New Age. And behind it all is an amazing technique of getting the people to pounce on it, to gobble it up because of ego. You see, the religion that has been pushed, the big time, it must appeal to the ego and have no rules. John Dewey, again, referred to this a long time ago, the guy who was sent in to set up the educational system for the United States. And he made reference to this, that there'd be no real morality as we know it. It'd be selective morality, do your own thing, basically. That became the term that was used, that you do your own thing. No rules, and no real inhibitions. Anyone who was inhibited was odd, and they called them square. So, when you read Michael Gorbachev's book, Towards a New Civilization, and you hear an atheist who admits in the same book he is an atheist, stating that we, and his foundation and others, were working towards a new world religion, which would be based on a form of earth worship. And you read the eugenics experiments that are going on all around you. It's papers and magazines every day now. And the greening nonsense we're hearing all around us, and the catastrophe with the global warming and how we are causing it, straight out of the book that invented it, The First Global Revolution by the Club of Rome. That was the book, The First Global Revolution, where they said they needed a cause to unite the planet and for this agenda. And they came up with the idea of saying it was global warming and the public were to blame. That was in the 1970s, and it's been done. It's been done. And you see all mixed together again with the New Age religions where nothing is real. The old Beatles song, Nothing is Real, Strawberry Fields. And you're seeing people who should be really fairly intelligent, fairly streetwise and savvy, telling you that nothing's real, it's all illusion. And you ask them where they get this, and this big response, they're not sure. It's everywhere, they say. It's everywhere. It's in all the magazines they read, it's in the movies they watch. It's a new religion, and they don't even know it. And it's a religion that ties in with the greening. It's a religion that will tie in with the depopulation program, where people will voluntarily come forward and have themselves sterilized to save Mother Earth. And I do have articles here about that. It's already happening. We now have the volunteers coming forth. Isn't it beautiful? It took from the late 1800s to create this religion that's now blossoming, so to speak, and turning very green in our own lifetime. And yet most of the people who've lived right through that up to the present are oblivious as to how it all happened, because they don't question. They don't question. And the techniques of creating a religion are so well known. They were known in ancient times, especially the one to do with the earth type. Paganism. It must appeal to the ego, where you can become, going back to the Garden of Eden allegory,